Many people would like to leave a legacy, especially if they don't consider themselves spiritual or even, shall we say, religious. For instance, Andrew Carnegie arguably wished to leave a legacy by seeing as many institutions bear his name, at least on the building, or by having created many, many libraries. Even Carnegie Hall coming to mind. Others, for instance, Sheldon Solomon, who carried on the ideas of Ernest Becker, who wrote the book Denial of Death around 1960, saying that for some people who aren't religious and hoping to live forever or counting on it through a abode beyond in heaven, whatever call it, Sheldon Solomon pointing out in a video or more that in his estimation, many, if not counting on living forever in a realm called heaven, say, or spiritual dimension, wish to do it by leaving a legacy. And he pointed out putting your name on something or giving a lot of money philanthropically, or even through some great writing of literature that you leave behind, or artwork. Hence, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and others. Or leaving behind the great American novel, you might say, or Picasso's works, what have you. All, in a sense, the leaving behind of a legacy. Interestingly, my mind was jogged a few years ago, and more recently, by a movie with Jack Nicholson in it about Schmidt. And at the very end, he was lamenting in somewhat down-in-the-mouth fashion that after a point in time, well, maybe 50 years, I'm not sure the number of years, that no one would even know you existed. Well, then what about Andrew Carnegie? For haven't we all heard of Carnegie Hall? But how many know details about Mr. Carnegie as to how much wealth he had relative to that time or overall in today's dollars, and how he got the money and why he gave it away? And matters of depression, intense depression in later years in his life, arguably by how he got the money and the impact upon many, many millions of lives, as to the steel empire he built, massively prospered by, on the back of a war, basically. For today, I press almost anyone to come up with the idea of who Mr. Carnegie was, other than Carnegie Hall, if they even think of that term, or the Carnegie Center, as per tied to libraries, perhaps. Now, in a more spiritual dimension, perhaps, there's at least one person who has lamented to me that Mother Teresa is given rather short shrift compared to certain celebrities that have died of late. Now, of course, some do not hold Mother Teresa in high esteem, but of course, who is perfect? Even Albert Schweitzer, Dr. Albert Schweitzer, who went to Africa starting around the 1920s, he felt so much that he had benefited much more in childhood from a great upbringing, as he called it. His father, a Lutheran minister, his mother of great empathy, he considered. So he wanted to give back under the phrase in the Bible, the verse, "To whom much hath been given, much is expected." And by about age 37, he had acquired a medical degree and 2 PhD degrees and went to Africa to help a number of people there. And many in Europe told him he was nuts to give up fame and money of great proportion and go there for relatively low pay financially, no pay basically, but pay emotionally, I would say, or counting on something after death, whatever have you. But here's an interesting point. At least once, maybe not, if not twice, I had taken some of my photo work and offered a couple people a pic of several photographs which they could have for free. And one of the photographs picked at least once out of a handful was that of a portrait of Albert Schweitzer from some source. And I asked them, why did you pick this photo? And I might have mentioned this is Albert Schweitzer, Dr. Albert Schweitzer, and I seem to recall from this younger individual at least that they never heard of him. They liked the photo because it was in black and white and the others were in color. So much for leaving a legacy, even as per Albert Schweitzer. And again, as per Mother Teresa, there is an incendiary book, some would say, out on Mother Teresa called The Missionary Position. And so who's to say whether leaving a legacy, in terms of even being considered virtuous, is regarded as such in all circles, or even is leaving a legacy an all-or-nothing binary thing. Maybe we can only leave a good impression in certain areas and not in others. How can we say then that leaving a legacy is to leave the image of being virtuous in all respects, not just some respects? So I bring this up because in certain circles, certain groups of people, certain viewpoints, there's considerable concern about leaving a good legacy. And this has strong impact then upon how they view end-of-life matters. Say whether they believe they ought to go to a nursing home, as it's called, or Alzheimer unit, as opposed to taking other measures lest they leave a bad legacy. There being a very prominent figure, say, at least one lately, who took matters into their own hands as per how they wanted to die, rather than the, quote, approved solution in some view, or the medical solution even, as to how best to die. And then appearing in tabloids and very popular magazines in the supermarket aisle, termed mentally ill even for having done this, as opposed to choosing the approved solution that would leave basically a better legacy, or some would say. So if we're talking brass tacks then as to concerns about leaving a good legacy as to even how you die, and the economics of it even, and the pain level and the duration of death process, are we doing this out of concern for what legacy we think we're going to leave, when in fact we may have a rather unnuanced view of what leaving a legacy even is about, as I've been talking about? It's not the simplest of terms, is it? There are even people in my mind whom are on postage stamps and have holidays who are not virtuous to an nth degree in my mind. They had strong flaws. And yet some would say, oh, they left such a great legacy and were perfect. I don't know anybody who has ever lived who's perfect and thus can be considered to have left a perfect legacy, even amongst spiritual leaders of the greatest proportions. Hence, I bring to the fore the concept that maybe leaving a legacy is not all it's cracked up to be. If we're concerned about it especially, we need to take a deeper look at this.